Yo, what is up, guys? Still an aka Christian Deputy, and today I also have my power rankings for the first week of the ACDL, but this time this is for the second group of 16 players. So, I do again want to just make sure I get this out of the way. I don't want to go too in depth on the teams and the plays and the games and everything, as that's what I will be using my weekly recaps for. So, with that out of the way, let me go ahead and get started with my last place team at 16th. I have the Wano Kuni Ronins. So, I think this was just mostly, they were just artist blocked or like team building blocked or something, because they bring something like Licky Licky, right? And you see that they have a Celesteela, and you don't bring your Mega Ampharos, right, to deal with that when it is bulky and can appreciate it being, or can appreciate that cleric support from the Licky Licky, right? Having only Cinderace to deal with the Celesteela cost them a lot, since it's not bulky. It can't really take a lot of hits, right? So it's gonna get worn down really easily, but Mega Ampharos wouldn't. And having that as an option to try and deal with the Celesteela, I think would have definitely helped them a lot. I mean, they do bring a really cool, well, I wouldn't say really cool, right? It's just, to deal with Celesteela better, they bring Bobbery Berry Tapu Lele, right, with Calm Mind and Thunderbolt, so it was able to knock it out eventually. But I mean, relying on a Fairy and a Psychic type to deal with a Steel type, right, is probably not the best idea. So, yeah, I really think if they just prepped for this game better, right, they were bringing in that Ampharos for the week, and it would have allowed them to play riskier, since they do have the Licky Licky. And then I don't even think Nidoqueen was too big of an issue, because again, they do have that Licky Licky. The thing they really did have to check was the Mega Charizard, because they didn't really have a lot for that, right? So yeah, I mean, they take a 5-0 loss, but that could have easily been a 6-0 if they just kept their Snorlax in against the Lele. But yeah, so I did go ahead and put them at my last place, even though they didn't take the biggest loss. Right, so at 15th place, I have the Orlando Magic Bouncers, who actually did get 6-0'd, but this was attributed a lot to a Fire Blast miss from Chandelure on Shaman, right? Had that not missed, it would have knocked it out, since we knew the item, and then it wouldn't have been able to just wall his entire team. I definitely also don't agree with bringing something like Sludge Bomb instead of Sludge Wave on a Nidoking, especially since Sheer Force just cancels the chance to poison. So you definitely want to bring that stronger attack. Those little percentages do matter. And then I'm not sure if the Mega Absol just didn't have knockoff, it only had Sucker Punch, but that could have cost them a lot, right? So either they just didn't have it, or they didn't click it when it was already in range. So yeah, I don't know. I don't really have a lot to say, because the game could have gone a lot differently if the Chandelure didn't miss its attack. But yeah, I definitely won't put them at last this week, because again, they really had no agency in that, right? I mean, they do make some board plays after, right, which definitely would have helped to deal with the Shaman, but that miss also did cost them a lot in that game. So I do have them at 15th place. At 14th, probably as a big surprise to everyone, them not being last or something, I have the Scumpunk. obviously, I mean, they have the worst draft of the draft. And then they also make a lot of weird plays. Right? They don't really deal with Conkelder with the team they had, right? And I believe they don't even like bring Zatu to try and check it. So they basically had to sack like 3 things just to Conkelder so that, well, just to deal with it, right? They had to like get rid of 3 things against them, against that Conkelder, so it would eventually be knocked out. I really don't have a lot to say. I mean, especially because they were able to bring it to a 2-0 loss, which is surprising to me since they do have the worst team. But I mean, definitely they quickly need to make changes, right? Or else they're just gonna keep losing their games. So I went ahead and put them at 14th just because they made their game pretty close, especially with the tools they have, right? At 13th, I have the Glaceons. So they take a 5-0 loss for their first week of the season with what I would say was a poorly built team to combat his opponent's team, right? Like they don't bring Dragalge, which deals with things like Sylveon, Vaporeon, Vileplume, right? Like they definitely missed that like strong poison type and the dragon typing, since it does also deal with Moltres, even if because of its nice special bulk. So the only thing it doesn't really like to face against the opponent is the Garchomp as well as the Aegislash, right? But you definitely have checks for those, right? So if you bring like Dragalge and like Ferrothorn and your other steel types, since you have a lot of steel types, you could definitely, like, this is a very winnable game. And then having something like Togekiss to try and check Garchomp as well, and the Lopunny. So yeah, I mostly just have to say that it was like poor prep, because Vileplume was just able to beat literally everything he brought aside from like the Galarian Mr. Mime. And obviously the Scarf Mr. Mime, right, was really cool to try and get the surprise knockout on Lopunny, but it does live on like 1%. So, I mean, this easily could have been a 4-0, right, if they got that roll in their favor. But they didn't, and they also didn't, again, prep well for a lot of his options. So, I did go ahead and put them at 13th place. You know, if they're able to bring better prep, I could definitely see this team be one of the top contenders, right, for playoffs. But this 5-0 loss definitely just put them on the back seat by a heavy amount. At 12th, I have the Philadelphia Flygons. So not having another option in their draft to take care of a steel type definitely hurt them a lot, especially since the steel type his opponent brought dealt with their Volcarona potentially. So, I mean, you can see by what they brought, like, their team doesn't really appreciate a fire type, right? Just coming in and clicking their fire type for free. But I definitely think they got lucky that their opponent didn't play their fire type how they should have, because I mean, it just kind of 6-0'd his team. And I mean, props to them, right? They were able to get a few knockouts, right, with the Alolan Sandslash at the end, just clicking Swords Dance on everything with like no fear. And I think it definitely would have been able to clean up the game, but either it didn't have enough speed to outspeed like the Tentacruel, or the Tentacruel Scarfed. I don't think it ever revealed Black Sludge, but yeah, I think, yeah, so the Tentacruel did like save them from that sweep from the Sand Slashers and HP Fire, which allowed it to knock itself out with its Life Orb recoil. But yeah, I mean, in free agency, I'd like for them to pick up a better steel type check, because I mean, Volcarona is not going to be able to do it by itself, and Quagsire is a very poor ground type in my opinion. So I do have them at 12th place. At 11, I have the Toxic Tyrantrums. So this is another one of those close games. They did take a 1-0 loss, right? Which could have been avoidable easily with a different order of plays at the end game, right? And I do want to save my thoughts on that for the recap. And then, I mean, Zapdos going early was really tough for them, but I mean, there's not much they could have switched into a Mega Gardevoir, so I can see why you just let it go down there. So, I mean, I really don't have a lot to say about them. They have a really strong draft and they played very well, but they do just need to think out their end game and, you know, act on it. Definitely, they'll be able to take wins. At 10th, I have the Los Angeles Rampardos. They also take a 1-0 loss, and they also had a really nice tech in this game. They did get their Dragon Ball trapped, you know, trying to overpredict, I would say. But, and then they also sacked their Jirachi really early when you had a check to the Excadrill, right? And Jirachi just kind of checked like half of his opponent's team. They also do get some unfortunate luck against them, right? Like the Excadrill ends up flinching the Mandibuzz every time it was able to knock it out. So it was able to just click Swords Dance and keep it low again. Thankfully, it was able to get a double knockout since it did have Life Orb, right? So it wasn't able to just sweep through the entire team because of that luck. But definitely just need to play their games a little bit better, right? And they'll bounce back from this loss easily since it is a very narrow 1-0. So that does put them at 10th place for me. At 9th, I have the Morayo Mantas. They also take a very close 1-0 loss, and they do make some nice plays and then a few questionable ones. Like the Scarf Tornadus gets revealed turn 1, and you know, it knocks out your Wheezing with a Sludge Wave, and you don't go Heracross. Right when Heracross resists the poison attack, and it would have been able to threaten something out really well and potentially gotten another knockout. And then forced mind games with like Hurricane and Sludge Wave against the Tapu Koko switch in or something like that. And then he dealt with the Slowbro very nicely with his Marowak as well. But I think they could have easily also knocked out the Tornadus early, because it did have a Swords Dance up. With the Rocks damage, it was already in range of being knocked out by the Shadow Bone. So him just letting it go in fear of losing your item when you already had the knockout on it because of that Swords Dance was pretty questionable, right? Like freeing up the Tornadus lets Heracross just do whatever it wants, especially with the options his opponent brought that week, right? They were like pretty slow aside from like the Gallade. And yeah, so again, Heracross would have just been able to tear up the rest of the team by itself, right? So just very close game, you know. Few better plays can definitely see this team easily go back up. right? So I do have them at 9th. At 8th, I have the Bash NATO Arcanites. They are the last place of the winners. They did play against, as I think everyone would agree, the worst draft. So, like, even the Conkelder alone just beat most of his team just with, like, the stab attack and, like, ice punch, right? Or thunder punch, even to beat, like, Mega Blastoise too. Like, and then, I mean, he plays well, obviously, around what advantage he had, right? Conkelder is able to get 3 knockouts. It's able to knock out Noivern, Scrafty, and then Morpeko. And then I believe it chips something else a little bit, but yeah, it was able to get 3 knockouts for the game. Mega Scizor also dealt with a lot of the things his opponent brought, like potential Dragon and Scrafty, or even like Morpeko and things like that, like Xatu it would deal with. So I don't think they were ever in threat of losing, because my logic could also cover for the Scizor if it wasn't any danger. So yeah, I think it'd be more surprising for me to see them lose instead of win this week, especially with the tools they had for this game. But yeah, I do just put them at 8th place this week. At 7th, I have the Kokomokomos. They do secure a 1-0 victory, but I believe their play was very poor, and they weren't really thinking turns ahead. They were only just thinking about the next turn that was going to happen. Like, at one point they have Gengar in against the Tapu Fini, and they overpredict Tyranitar coming in, which of course it's an overpredict because it doesn't come in, and Tapu Fini gets to click knock off, right? So it knocks off the Life Orb, and then it gets to retreat, right? When Tapu Fini was a bigger threat to his team than the Tyranitar was, especially with all the checks you had check in a Scarf, Infernape, you had a Corviknight, like, and then against Fini, like the Fini is what you wanted to knock out because it also checks like Seismitoad and Infernape, right? It also can potentially deal with Corviknight. It's like a Taunt Nature's Madness set. So if they're able to see these things, right, in their future games, they could definitely get better wins, right? Like bigger wins, but they do need to sharpen up their senses in seeing what play will open up the game versus you. Because, I mean, sure, Gengar, you click Focus Blast and then you knock out the Tyranitar. Say, okay, well, like, cool. Now Gengar doesn't deal with Tyranitar, but now you still have to face a Zygarde, a Cobalion, a Tapu Fini, right? A Victini that could be potentially scarfed. It's like, if you just get rid of the Tapu Fini there, and even then, like, clicking Sludge Wave with Life Orb, you get the necessary chip to then knock out the Tyranitar if it does come in, right? So focus, or Sludge Wave was just the easy safe play, especially since I was also expecting probably Hidden Power Ice, so nothing really comes in against it. Like, if the Gengar was Sludge Wave, Shadow Ball, HP Ice, and Focus Blast, then you don't really need to predict, right? Like, you just click whatever you want. The Tyranitar is a Mega, so it has to hold the stone. It's not scarfed, so your Gengar isn't in any threat. So just clicking the Poison attack into the next coverage attack would have gotten you a knockout regardless. So, for that, I mean, I did go ahead and put them at 7th place, right? They still won their game. They were able to capitalize on their opponent right? Not making the quote-unquote correct plays, right? Or the best plays. So, again, that puts them at 7th place for me. At 6th place, I have the Chicago Toros, and really I have the same opinion for them. Like, at the end, they click Wish on Clefable instead of just clicking Moonblast to knock out the Hitmontop, and then sacking Clef for the Darmanitan, right? And then just going Slowking and winning the game like that. Instead, they click Wish. They make like 4 other different turns happen that don't matter if you just knock out the Hitmontop, right? So, I mean, again, they get a very narrow 1-0 victory, and they do play the rest of the game very well. They do get a few lucky flinches, but aside from that, that's what I want to see. Like, same thing from the 7th place team, right? Just play your games better. Look at what's happening, right? Look at what knocking out, or look at what a turn will do for you, right? You knock out the Hitmontop, and then that just opens up the game for your other guys, right? Instead of having to click Wish and then click Protect, or click Wish and then go Slowking, and then click Scald, and then go back to Clefable, and then go Slowking, and then do this and do that and do this, right? Like, one turn would have just negated the other ones, right? Those other turns didn't need to happen. So I do go ahead and put them at 6th place for me. At 5th place, I have the Eterna City Entes, right? A 1-0 victory that easily could have been a loss if the Hurricane at the end missed, but thankfully for them, that wasn't the case, and they were able to walk away with that victory. Scarf Torn was really cool, right? To be able to catch Tapu Koko off guard with the poison attack. Swords Dance on Gallade was crucial to breaking through like Landorus T, and then even like Steel Roller on Steelix was also very cool, as it forced Tapu Koko to keep coming in to set up the terrain if he wanted to abuse his Alolan Raichu, right? So, I mean, they didn't really need to make any predictions this game. Like, the sets they brought just let them make safe plays, right? They didn't really need to think about, oh, if I click this, this is gonna happen, and they could do this other thing, and blah blah blah, right? Like, they just needed a quick button. Okay, what happened? Oh, I got a knockout? Sure. Okay, now I go into this as he goes into this thing, right? So, very safe plays, but I mean, they didn't really have to make any reads or anything, so I just go ahead and put them at 5th. At 4th, I have the Shamrock Snowverse. Very nice Bronzong bring by them, especially with the set they brought. And I wouldn't even be surprised if it was heat-proof instead of Levitate for this game, right, to deal with Volcarona by itself. I think they could have gotten a way higher differential this game if they just clicked Flare Blitz on their Incineroar every turn it was in, instead of trying to over-predict things. Like, nothing really liked being in against it. So, just clicking Flare Blitz on like every turn just won the game. They did almost get reverse swept by an Alolan Sandslash, but the Tentacruel at the end was able to save them with an HP Fire that was able to put it in range of it, knocking itself out with the Life Orb. So yeah, definitely the only thing I have to say about them is that they need to be taking advantage of clear weaknesses that their opponent has, right? Like I said, that Incineroar can just click Flare Blitz and knock out a Pokemon every turn. So, yeah. So for them, I have them at 4th. At 3rd, I have the Max Meowsticks. So the Meowsticks take a 5-0 victory this week, with Vileplume being a big threat to their opponent. It was a 5-0, but this also could have been a 6-0 if they realized that Crocodile is faster than Moltres, and then switch out into something like Sylveon or Garchomp into what would have most likely been the Rock or Dark attack. But, I mean, I do still agree with making the safe play and not letting something get randomly crit or whatever. So, his opponent brought a team that was very weak to Vileplume, and I mean they just capitalize on that really well and take the victory. Like, it's not a lot to say about them, right? Like, they just take advantage of their opponent not taking the Vileplume into consideration. At second place, I have the LA Lapras. So they did get a 6-0, and the first place got a 5-0, but I do feel that they had a lot of luck in their favor. Well, not a lot, but they did have some luck in their favor, as well as some very interesting plays that probably shouldn't be made. Like, Shaman against Chandelure. Like, yes, we know the Chandelure missed, but you could have just lost your Shaman there, like, for nothing, right? It did reveal it was Scarfed as it outsped it. And then, but they had a Blastoise, right, at 100%, and a Mamoswine that was down to their Focus Sash to just come in and find out what set it is. So, risking the Shaman like that in the first place, like, wasn't a very good play, and they got rewarded for it. Like, again, since they do have either a sack to find out or a safe switching in Blastoise, right? So if you find out it's Scarf and it locks itself into a type of attack, like the Fire Blast that missed, you stay in with Blastoise, right? And if it does the Ghost attack, then you can go into something else, right? Like, if it does the Ghost attack, you could just sack your Mamoswine then, and then go into something that could tank the Shadow Ball and knock it out. So, yeah, I mean, that was really my only issue with the team, like, just taking an unnecessary risk that, you know, they got rewarded for. So, I did go ahead and put them at second place. And at first, I have the San Francisco Deltas. So, clean 5-0 victory secures them the first place for the first week of play. Celesteela was a huge issue for his opponent, and he just played his Celesteela well. Like, Leech Seed was able to rack up damage so that they could slowly be worn down and eventually knocked out, and that's something they really couldn't deal with, especially since nothing really wanted to come in against that Celesteela except for the Licky Licky. But even then, like, Licky Licky Click Wish, it switches out into something that can't deal with Celesteela again, and then Celesteela just clicks Leech Seed again. Like, I think this is mostly just attributed to his opponent not bringing everything they should have, right? Like, but even then, like, the Keldeo set was also super cool. The Snorlax EVs were really nice. You know, Keldeo being mono fighting attack was really smart, as, you know, the water attack is absorbed by the Gastrodon, right? So there's just no point in bringing the water attack if the fighting attack just everything you needed to do. So no real risky plays had to be made, as Celesteela just kind of dealt with the whole team by itself, aside from Cinderace. But yeah, so I mean, a very clean victory. No hacks, right? No luck on their end. They just played well, and they got rewarded for their nice play, right? I did go ahead and put them at first place for the first week of the second group. So, with that out of the way, guys, I will be posting weekly recap very soon as well. So keep an eye out on that. And then week 2 should also be coming out very soon. So with that out of the way, guys, thank you very much for watching. This has been Christian Deputy.